In the last unit, we opened up by talking about how prices are supposed to be this, in the perfect competition model, prices are this beautiful instrument for allocating resources because they tell you how much it costs to produce something and they simultaneously tell you how much society values that thing. And so by finding the point where those two things are equal, we're basically using all of our money and our resources in the way that is sort of optimal, at least if we're happy with how initial income is allocated at the outset. But when you have a monopolist, you lose that. The power of the price goes away to some extent because now price reflects cost. It also reflects willingness to pay, but it's not equal to those two things. It's greater than marginal cost. It's going to be equal to somebody's willingness to pay. That's true, but it's no longer equal to marginal cost. We could produce more of the good and efficiently use society's resources. Now, that was one way that prices can go wrong, but in the real world, prices are a lot more complicated than even that, okay? In the real world, you actually don't often see just a single price that corresponds to the good. Just as often you see a whole array of prices for different people and for different versions of the good, okay? So to rattle off a few, to buy the same flight to go from point A to point B, you might pay really different prices depending on when you buy your ticket. If you're a member of a frequent flyer mile club, you might be able to get the price differently than somebody who doesn't belong to that. At the same time, you could pay for first class or second class seats, same flight, same place to get from A to B, different service on board, and so you end up paying really different prices. Or you think about going to the movies. There's the price to see the film in the evening. There's a different price, typically lower, to see a matinee. There's a different price maybe for senior citizens, a different price for students, and so on, right? So why are there all these different prices for the same good? Or you can think about completely different goods that are basically where the price is never even written down, but is negotiated between partners. So you can think about the price of, a contract between like a company that's going to provide a service and a customer who needs it, and they have to negotiate over what that exact price will be, and it's going to end up that every customer pays a slightly different price. Or you can think of another example. You go to Costco and there's one price, but the price to access that price, you have to pay an annual membership fee. So many different ways that prices are more complicated than just P equals the value of one good, the price that you have to pay for that. So that's what this unit is all about. It's about price discrimination, and so which is what we call this phenomenon of essentially charging different people different prices, or charging different prices for different transactions over nominally the same good. So to see why a firm would want to do this, let's imagine you're a monopolist, okay? And as we discussed in the last unit, if a monopolist faces demand like so, and has, say, constant marginal cost here, see, like that, we can figure out the price that this monopolist charges to maximize their profit by drawing a line with twice the slope, which is going to be equal to the marginal revenue curve, and where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, that pins down the quantity that this firm should sell, and then the quantity tells us, when we combine it with the demand curve, the price that they should charge to access this good. I just deleted it accidentally. All right, so that's the price, and here's their profit. But if you're a firm, you're a little bit unsatisfied with this allocation because there's all this white space up here. These represent people who are willing to pay for your product, and you're not getting as much profit out of them as you could. Let's think about these people over here to begin with, okay? All of these guys want to buy your product, and they want to hand you more money than it costs you to make it. So if you could find a way to sell to them, that would be great. But they're not willing to pay your monopoly price, so to sell to them, you're going to have to offer a lower price, okay? But to access them, you'd have to drop your price, and that's going to force you to lose profit on all these other guys over here. What if instead you could charge just these guys over here this lower price and keep these guys paying a higher price? Well, then you could make a little bit of extra profit off these guys. Say you charge these customers this lower price, we'll call this like PM2, and you would earn that extra profit. But why stop there? There's these guys on this other side who are willing to pay a lot for the product, and they're getting it for, from your perspective, a steal. They're paying only the monopoly price. If you could charge them a higher price, but still keep charging this lower price to the people who aren't willing to pay that, you could get this profit up here too. We'll call that PM3. So how are you going to be able to charge, if there was a way that a firm could do this and charge different prices to different people, it would really want to. And this practice is called price discrimination. It's not about discrimination in the colloquial sense of the word or in the common usage. It's not about racism or bigotry. It's about charging different prices for the same transaction, the same kind of transaction. And for price discrimination to happen, there are 3 conditions that need to be met. First, you have to have some degree of market power. If the firm doesn't have market power, if there's a rival out there who's going to charge marginal cost, and if you try to charge above it, nobody will buy from you, well, then the whole conversation is moot. All of this discussion about how much you should charge, you have no choice. If you don't charge marginal cost, you get 0 buyers. So firms need to have an ability to set price above marginal cost. They need to face a downward sloping demand curve. The second thing is firms need information about consumers' willingness to pay, and they need a way to be able to obtain this without too much cost. So without too high transaction costs. So for example, it would be possible to interview every customer who comes in, sort of give them a whole financial audit, and then figure out they're willing to pay. And that might make sense for some kinds of firms. For example, this is kind of what colleges do when they ask you to fill out all this FAFSA information and give you all this information about your willingness or your ability to pay. They have all sorts of information about your ability to pay then, and you're talking about a very big transaction, tens of thousands of dollars a year typically, and so it's worth doing maybe. But a movie theater that's thinking of charging different prices to people, it might be that some people are willing to pay a couple dollars less, some people a couple dollars more. They don't have the resources. The transaction cost would be too high. But they still, if they want to practice price discrimination, they need some information, and we'll see what kinds they do use. The third thing you need is a way to prevent resale. What is resale? Resale is when a secondary market opens up where people begin to sell and buy the good you're selling, but not from you, okay? So imagine you're trying to offer all these people different prices. If this guy down here has access to PM2, the low price, he would have a profitable opportunity if he could take his price and go sell it to the person whose only opportunity is to buy at P3M from you. If he's like, look, you can buy from that guy for this high monopoly price, or you can buy from me from the old lower monopoly price. And then they both make a profit off of that, and you're no longer going to get this guy buying from you at the high price. So you need a way to prevent resale, or this whole thing breaks down. And we'll talk about in this unit basically 3 main types of price discrimination that have these characteristics, but to sort of more or less degree. So they might have more information about the willingness to pay or more ability to prevent resale. And we'll talk about those in the next couple of units.